How you doing, guys? Welcome to Shifty's top 10 games of 2020. And there's only really 2 rules before we get into this video, and I want to make this quick because 10 games is going to take a while to talk about. But the 2 rules are: it has to be a game that released in 2020, and I personally had to have played that game. So unfortunately, that means games like Among Us and Yakuza Like a Dragon won't be on this list, even though I probably most likely would have put both of them on this list if I could. But that's it, and enjoy the rest of the video. Number 10, Immortals Fenyx Rising. Now, when it came to Immortals Fenyx Rising, I was basically just expecting a very decent Zelda game. Obviously, it's not actually a Zelda game, it's from Ubisoft, and typically I don't really like Ubisoft games, but I think I was actually pleasantly surprised with Immortals Fenyx Rising. I've been playing it for quite some time now, and honestly, I got more or less what I expected. Of course, there are some things Zelda does a lot better. This is essentially a game inspired by Zelda Breath of the Wild. But in terms of what it does, the humor, the game doesn't take itself very seriously, unlike Breath of the Wild. It's a very, very comical game, and it's actually pretty funny. It's most of the time pretty cheesy, but I think it's the good kind of cheesy, the kind of cheesy that kind of has a bit of charm to it, right? And yeah, I don't have a ton to say about Immortals Fenyx Rising, but I do think that if you are a Nintendo fan who is open to games who have their own spin or interpretations of a game with a Breath of the Wild-like formula, I would definitely give Immortals a try. There are some things that are not exactly the same like Zelda. They have their own spin on things, and sometimes that's for the better and sometimes that's for the worse. But it was pretty enjoyable. I was actually pretty surprised. I want to say, like, the worst thing about Immortals Fenyx Rising is probably that they have this very weird way of finding things to do instead of going on a tower and being told everything in a game, which is typically not something I like in games, or being like Breath of the Wild, where you just kind of discover things on your own accord. You kind of had to scan everything and just hit the R2 button or right trigger, depending on the platform you're playing on, and I don't really like that very much. But you know, this game isn't perfect, and that's why it gets the number 10 spot on this list. Number 9, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. Fall Guys was actually a lot of fun. It's kind of hard to describe why I like this game, because honestly, there's not really like a ton that goes into it. It's just a lot of fun. It's a really good multiplayer game. I play it all the time with friends, and every time I play, I'm always yelling at the top of my lungs just because it's such a fun game. It's so hectic, and I enjoy it so much. Probably the best multiplayer game that came out this year, in terms of just a casual game, right? Other than another game on this list that will come up very soon. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and I still enjoy playing it, so yeah. Number 8, Phasmophobia. Now, like I said with the Fall Guys placement on this list, Phasmophobia is that other multiplayer game that I alluded to basically as being like the best multiplayer game of the year, and I kind of want to stick to that. It's a really good game. It's very rough, which is why I didn't want to put it any higher on this list. I already logged about 80 to 90 hours playing this game with a bunch of friends. I also made a video dedicated to Phasmophobia in October, so if you're interested, definitely check it out. But it is a very fun game. It's very stressful and it can be very scary even with friends there, and I think that's very difficult to do, to be able to scare people while they're with their friends. It's very challenging. There's a lot of horror games that just, you know, fail at trying to scare you when they added like a co-op feature, but Phasmophobia actually manages to do it, and do it pretty well, and the game is consistently getting updates to this day. And yeah, I don't know, it's just been a lot of fun, and it's scary, it's suspenseful, and it makes me laugh with friends, and that's really all I really want from a multiplayer game, to have a lot of good times with friends. Number 7, Ghost of Tsushima. Now, Ghost of Tsushima is a very good game. However, it has a ton of issues. Not only does it have a ton of issues, but
Shifty. Oh, 7? Ghost of Tsushima at 7? Dude, I'm literally on my way to work. I had to stop what I was doing. You put Ghost of Tsushima at 7. Alright, look, I already have my own video on Ghost of Tsushima called The Goat of Tsushima for a reason. Check it out if you really want my full opinion. But I'm just gonna briefly say, between the incredible story, which by the end, you're gonna feel moved, the super unique and fun gameplay, the character build-up, the attachment you have to certain characters, and animals, may I say. This game was easily the game of the year in 2020, completely robbed, and I've played Last of Us 2. It's a good game, but it's not as good as Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know, man. Look, like, I'm gonna go to work, but that ruined my day, Shifty. You put Ghost at 7.
How did you even get in this video without me knowing? Well, if you guys don't know, that was Radical. Cool dude. Clearly had a lot to say and did not like my placement of his favorite game. But I'm sorry, Rad. It's only number 7 on this list, and mind you, that's still pretty high for me. I think that's a pretty high listing for Ghost of Tsushima. I think everything Rad, for the most part, said is accurate. Is mostly accurate. Ghost of Tsushima is a fantastic game. I have very few issues with the game. For starters, I felt that the game had this very big choice in its story. I don't want to get into spoilers, but it had a very big choice in being honor bound or being bound to that ghost style, right? And for the entire game, I played honorable until the game suddenly and abruptly just chooses the ghost path for you. Because apparently there was only really one path in the game. And as someone who was playing honor bound the entire way through the game, that was a little disappointing. It was a little disappointing. So I kind of got disconnected from the story for that reason. I am also not very huge on the open world design of going to a location and the game telling you everything that you can do in that area. For me, it ruins exploration. It makes the game feel like it's a checklist. So I'm basically going down this shopping list of tasks to do instead of just discovering what's out there. But the game is very pretty. The combat is fun and fluid. And yeah, it's a good game otherwise. Number 6, Wasteland 3. I think this might be the most surprising game on this list. I made a video talking about why I believe Wasteland 3 was the biggest surprise of 2020 for me, and I still very much stick by that. Wasteland 3 doesn't get any higher because it is a very buggy game, but when it works, my god, is it engrossing? Is it interesting? Has it made me laugh multiple times? It has done so much for me that I can't ignore it. I basically cannot ignore it, and I think that the game is just phenomenal in many ways. It's a great RPG. It's a great story. It has a great story going on. Many features, many storyline, plot lines that are very interesting. It just has a lot of things going for it. I just wish the game wasn't as buggy. And that's why it's not any higher on this list. I think it's extremely buggy to the point of crashing consistently. Co-op is broken. Mind you, this is before many updates with the game. Maybe that has improved over time. I am not entirely sure. But Wasteland 3 is a phenomenal game that is just marred with a lot of bugs, which can kind of remind me of a certain other game that released this year, but I haven't played yet. You know, maybe I'll push Cyberpunk 2077 to a future best of 2021 video, because it came out so late that I could not finish it in time. But yeah, going back to Wasteland 3, it is a fantastic game. I highly recommend it if you like RPGs similar to Fire Emblem, where tactical role-playing goodness is up your alley. You know, I highly recommend it. If you have an Xbox, it is on Xbox Game Pass. Download it, give it a shot. I think it's by far one of the most overlooked games of the year. Number 5, Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is an interesting placement because I feel number 5 on this list and number 4 on this list, the very next game, are interchangeable. I actually do believe that they are essentially tied, and the only reason why one game is ahead of the other is because I genuinely couldn't choose between the two. I was going back and forth on these two. So if you want to look at number 5 and number 4 as interchangeable, you could look at it that way, because that's basically how I look at it. And Final Fantasy VII Remake is a very good game. Mind you, I'm not someone who typically loves Final Fantasy VII. I think it is a very, very solid RPG. It is very good. But when I think of my favorite RPGs of all time, it doesn't really crack the top 10. Nothing against the game. It's very good, but, you know, I typically love a lot of other games also, or more so, rather. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think, gave me the impression that many people had when Final Fantasy VII first came out. Final Fantasy VII Remake made me realize why people like these characters so much, despite not feeling that way when I played the original, right? If there's anything I've always liked about Final Fantasy VII, regardless if it's the remake or the original, was that the music was always great and the character designs are probably the best in the series. But the remake takes those character designs and music and just completely blows it out of the water, right? It's fantastic. The only reason why Final Fantasy VII Remake is not higher primarily has to do with me just liking the other games that much more. This Final Fantasy VII Remake is an extremely solid game where I have very little complaints on, but not a lot that made me really love it, right? So, it's very good. It's very strong. I like this game a lot. I just like the other games on top, above this game more. That's basically how this goes. So yeah, that's pretty much why. Number 4, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And yeah, I mentioned it with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but these two games are interchangeable. You could look at Age of Calamity being number 5, you could look at Final Fantasy VII Remake being number 4, but this is the placement I decided to give them. And I almost disagree with myself to an extent. I agree with it, obviously, but I am at odds with myself. I almost switched these two games. I did it multiple times while writing for this video, making the list, checking it twice, and it was difficult, right? And the main reason being is that I enjoyed playing Age of Calamity a lot more, but at the same time, I disliked the story of Age of Calamity. So I guess you could look at it as Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was very neutral for like most of the game. I enjoyed it. Nothing hated, nothing loved. Age of Calamity, there was some things I straight up did not like, but I liked what I liked a lot more than what I hated, I suppose. So I enjoyed the game very much. I enjoyed the gameplay. I enjoyed experiencing, seeing the story, seeing the characters. Some things were not as good as it could. Some characters got better at voice acting when it comes to the English voice actors. The story was specifically a place where I was not too big of a fan of it. I think the game could have benefited from either telling the original story or telling a different story, whatever the case may be. But you can see that there was a little bit of a... it just didn't really hit the mark for me, basically. But I think because of my love for Breath of the Wild and my love for the world and the characters and whatnot, I still very much enjoyed seeing it fall into place, even if I did not necessarily love the story as much as I was expecting to when first getting into this game. So yeah, number 4 just goes to Age of Calamity. I really enjoyed the game, and while the story was a big miss for me, I still appreciated pretty much everything else about the game, to the point where I felt that even if I had that negative, I enjoyed it that much more. So it stays up at number 4. Number 3, Animal Crossing New Horizons. I did not realize how much time I actually did put into Animal Crossing. Mind you, the amount of time I put into this game is significantly lower than most people most likely have on their version of the game. However, I'm someone who also doesn't typically play Animal Crossing. I'm not someone who follows the series. This was I believe my second game. No, actually it's my third game in the series, and it's the first one I've actually put actual time on. The others I basically played, here and there, and basically dropped them very quickly. I was under the impression while playing this game that I had put in maybe at most 30 hours, and that was it. Turns out I have over 100 hours, and it's apparently one of my most played games on my Switch, which is just insane to me because it didn't feel like it was that long at all. But the game was apparently so enjoyable that I just didn't notice. And I think that's a big plus to a game. If you don't even notice that you spent like a ridiculous amount of time on the game and you just end up not even noticing. I think that's a huge plus. Not to mention, I don't really know much things I hate about the game. There are some things that I feel are missing. If I want to like nitpick a little bit more, I can say like, certain things in the game is a little bit inconvenient. But for the most part, there wasn't really anything that I downright hated. I pretty much enjoyed all of my time with it. And I know there are some features missing and that kind of thing that other Animal Crossing fans have mentioned. But I don't know. I just found the game to be extremely enjoyable, and I don't really have much to complain about it. So yeah, Number 3 is Animal Crossing. Number 2, Ori and the Will of Wisps. This game was overlooked to a massive degree in my mind. If not counting Wasteland 3, this is probably the most overlooked game. If Wasteland 3 was not on this list, I probably would have said Ori. And the reason for that is because I feel that Ori and the Will of Wisps has one of the best soundtracks I heard in the entire year. It has the most beautiful art style I've seen in years. It is insanely beautiful. I don't know how this game isn't winning every single art direction award out there. This game is just gorgeous, and I cannot believe some of the environments that this game has is as pretty as they are. It is insane how pretty this game is. And along with this beautiful soundtrack, along with this beautiful art style, you have a very emotional story that had me on the verge of tears, basically, on its ending. And it's basically an improvement on Ori and the Blind Forest. And Ori and the Blind Forest, I used to think was one of my favorite Metroidvanias of all time. But guess what? Now Ori and the Will of Wisps is one of the best Metroidvanias of all time in my mind. I liked it that much. It is a phenomenal game. And I don't think I can do it justice. It is such a beautiful game. The story's beautiful. It's rare to see games like this. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I enjoyed it. Everything was great. I still listen to the soundtrack to this day. It is a fantastic game. You have to go play it.
Could you tell what I think Game of the Year is? Because I don't know. You guys might know. All I see is green in this fucking thing.
My game of the year is Doom Eternal. How you doing, Doom Slayer? You had the best game of 2020. How do you feel? Good, I'd imagine. Good job. There's not a single game this year that has the soundtrack, the gameplay, the level design of Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal is, in my mind, by far the best first-person shooter single-player action you can have in the last like fucking 30 years of gaming. It is phenomenal. It is the best game of this year by far, in my mind. The soundtrack by Mick Gordon is phenomenal. It is so good, or was so good, in fact, that Mick Gordon, the music producer, basically, of the original base game of Doom Eternal, went on to make and help compose music with Bring Me the Horizon in their new album. He went from video game music to actual mainstream metal music. That's amazing. The fact that he was able to just like transcend video gaming, because his interpretation of metal was just that good, to the point where like professional musicians in the genre was just like, yeah, bro, come here. That was... I'm gushing. I'm gushing. Doom Eternal has an amazing gameplay loop that is just by far the most rewarding thing you can imagine. By killing enemies with execution-like kills called glory kills, you gain health back. So you're rewarded for playing aggressively. This is not your typical first-person shooter of the modern era where they want you to hide behind cover. No, they want you to play aggressive and they want you to get in their face. Play the Doomslayer and get in that demon's face and kill him. And by doing that, not only can you get health, but by chainsawing them, you get ammo so you can keep killing them. And by burning them, you also get armor. My mistake. You get armor. And doing all these things constantly goes back into this feedback loop where demons are hurting you. Oh, I need ammo. Let me chainsaw a demon to get some ammo. Oh, hey, while I was trying to do that, I got hurt a little bit. Oh, here's an execution. Let me light him on fire while I'm doing it. Boom, health and armor. Look at that. Gameplay loop that's constantly rewarding you for playing the game. The game is phenomenal. And the music is so just fast-paced, bumping, and it makes you want to just match the intensity of the music by playing the Doomslayer in the best way you possibly can, ripping and tearing each and every individual demon that's in your way. It is by far the best game of this year. I don't care. I loved it that much. I have done 5 different playthroughs. One was my first ever playthrough. One with Extra Lives mode. One on Nightmare. One on Ultra Nightmare. And one of the new DLC. I still plan on doing more. I've played every master level of the game on Nightmare difficulty. I still have to do a Nightmare difficulty run of the DLC. There's so much I want to do in that game. I cannot stop gushing about how good Doom Eternal is. If you have any love, any respect in first-person shooters, you owe yourself to play Doom Eternal. By the way, if you guys are interested in watching a highlight reel of all my top 10 games of the year, check it out. It'll be on the channel and linked down below.
Shifty, yeah, Shifty, wanna be the #1 gamer, come and get me. It'd be dope if you subscribe, could you like the vid please? Take your time, you don't gotta do it swiftly. Shifty, Shifty, wanna be the #1